Hey, Sam the Man here, and I'm going to be doing my introductory video on Lua. So, I'm going to be going over the bare minimum basics. So, if statements, for loops, while loops, and just things to get your code started. Obviously, Lua is a scripting language, so it has a lot of, I guess, ulterior functions, even functions specifically pertaining to bricks and parts and stuff like that. So it gets a lot more complicated, and it seems to be a language where you can never delve into it too much for learning something new. For example, I could spend, probably months studying the things I can do with bricks, whether it be just having the brick kill a user or having the brick do something more complicated, like generating pictures and stuff like that. Uh, it can get pretty complicated. So, as I'm in college, though I have a little time due to the coronavirus that I'm using right now, I won't be able to delve into everything that's complicated. Uh, so I'll just go over the things that help you out and that will get your game going, like data store, stuff that will help you save stuff in your game. That will be a later video. And just functions overall to make your code cleaner. Because I know when you're a new coder, the the start of your code can get pretty complicated, and you can end up with 1,000 lines real quick if you don't know how to use the proper loops. I actually went through and looked at some of my older code and was able to cut a ridiculous amount of it, probably like 90% of it, just by using strings and just the work within them, and was able to make my code way more efficient. So as you go on, your code will probably get shorter unless you're just making an entire system for everything, and I wouldn't be too concerned if it isn't right now, since you're here, you're new to Lua, and you're just looking for the basics. So forgive my syntax if I get it a little wrong. Chances are I will, as I'm learning Bash and C++ right now. Also Sed and Gawk, which haven't proven to be too useful yet. So I guess we'll see. So first off, I'm going to show an if statement. So in a lot of scripting languages, whether it be Bash or Lua, you have a wonky statement where it goes if something something equals that, then no, then on the outside, and then you have an end for your statement, and the end basically just tells it to end, I guess. So if you're going to be coding in C or C++, it would be something along the lines of if something equals that, and then you have the brackets, and it automatically puts the end, by the way. So that would be a C++ if statement. So you can see how as it goes across the different languages, it can vary quite a bit. So yeah, if you see any brackets, just know I'm wrong, and I'm a little rusty with Lua. So let's get going. So I guess we can go ahead and use this if statement that I just used. So we got if something equals that. Lua's pretty nice with its variables where you don't have to declare what type of variable there are. So I know in a lot of languages like Java and C++, you have to go int value equals 1. In Lua, that's awful syntax. So in Lua, all you have to do is go value equals 1, and it's going to go, oh, okay, it's an integer. Or you could go if value equals 1.09, it's going to go, okay, it's a double value. You don't really have to worry about putting labels on things like that. So let's create integer something equals 1, and I guess we'll go, yeah, I'll just make that another integer equals 1. So if something equals that, which it does, it's going to print okay. And that would be like a really basic check. Like, say you have a value that you've stored inside the player that determines if they're in your group or something like that. And if the value is 1, then you can make a door open. If the value is 0, then the door stays locked. It'd be something as simple as that you could use it for. And I mean, obviously, you're going to have lots of if statements later on. However, you're not going to want to use a bunch of them as if you kind of notice that you have a billion if statements, then that means your code can probably be simplified more with better loops and stuff like that. So let's move on to a while statement, and maybe we can create a Boolean value like continue equals false. So you could do while continue equals false, and with while loops, to make them run, you have to have the do. And so what this will do is it will run this code forever until you have continue equal true, and then it will stop running. Now the danger with loops like this and others is that if you have it infinitely running, then oftentimes you have to have a wait, because that gives the server the time to process it. Because if you have it running over and over, like say I did while continue equals false, that equals that plus 1, this is going to run an infinite number of times, and it's going to try and do it all at once, and this is just going to cause your servers to crash. It actually will cause you to crash in Studio, and it used to just kill the window, but now I guess Roblox kind of has a circuit breaker in place to where it doesn't crash your computer, which is kind of nice. So yeah, you're going to want to have that wait statement in if you're doing it for quite a few times at once. And so I guess let's do something like this. You could do while continue equals false, do, and then we could use our if statement that we utilized earlier and say if that equals 5, then let's see, continue equals true. So let's analyze our code a little bit here. So you have that adding itself every time the code runs, and whenever that equals 5, continue equals true, which will break the while loop, which means it will no longer run. And so that's pretty useful. Just keep in mind that since we have no wait here, it's going to reach 5 instantaneously. You won't probably even be able to measure how long it takes, but if we were to put a wait period of say 1, then the code is going to run for roughly 5 seconds here and there. You could have like a little bit of lag that throws it, but it would be 5 seconds. And so yeah, it's going to run for 5 seconds, each second adding 1 to that until that equals 5, and then continues going to equal true, and basically it'll knock this out of the loop, and it won't ever go back to the loop again unless it's inside of a function, and continue set to false again. Now the other thing you can do with while loops is you can put them in a script with nothing else, and you can just do while true. And what this does is it'll just run the code forever. You need to be careful with while true statements because oftentimes they can induce lag if you are, I guess, changing bricks in a short period of time. So say I have like a brick in the server and I'm rotating it with a while true. You're going to want to have like some significant weight, and you're not going to want to do with that with a bunch of bricks because that's going to induce lag. And yeah, as I said earlier, obviously you're going to want to have the wait statement, or else you're going to run into some trouble. So yeah, that's if statements and while loops. Both of those are pretty useful. Now, where the syntax gets interesting is with for loops. So I'm going to have to, honestly, I'm going to have to Google that for a second because I got C++ for loop stuck in my head. And a really good source to learn code is, you have lua.org, which the HTML is atrocious, and you also have the Roblox Developer Hub. You have scripting helpers. They have a really nice Discord where you can post questions. As long as you have the code and don't want them to do all the work for you, they will help you. And so yeah, there's a lot of support groups that are willing to help you out quite a bit. So there's a lot of for loops that I don't want to do right now because they're kind of complicated. Okay, this is a good starting point. So you can do a for I equals 1, 10, do, end. And so this is kind of, odd. The syntax may look kind of strange to you, especially if you've done other coding and stuff like that. So if you've done C++, a for loop's going to be like for int I equals 0, I is less than some other integer, and then I plus plus, so that's telling you, what to do with I. And then you're going to have, all this junk. That's something what a C++ for statement would look like. So you can see how it can get a little bit confusing translating between the two syntaxes. And so that's why I had to look it up. So what this does is you're going to have I equals 1, and it's going to run until I equals 10. And so, whatever you want to do in your code, it'll run 10 times. So say you want to print no U, it's going to run 10 times. And, it can be really useful. Say you're going to want to add money to a character or something like that. It'll run 10 times and, add like 1 coin to the character's value. And there are like much other uses. Like you can get the number of children in an object, and then you can edit those children. Like by children I mean bricks and stuff like that. So you could get a bunch of bricks that are the child of another brick, and you could turn them all red or something like that, and you could do that with a for loop. So if I could tell you anything, it would be that if statements are really useful, but you don't want to be using them all the time. You're going to want to be focusing on these other loops, because if you're using them too much, then your code will be redundant and can be done much better, and you can even cause yourself some lag. So that can be fairly problematic. So the other thing is that, let's see, in Lua, for comments, it's good to document your code. And even though you're making it, you still want to document your own code so you don't have to go through it and be like, what did I just make? Or what did I make a year ago? What was I doing in this code? Because a lot of times I'll recycle old code, especially with data stores, because I just don't feel like typing out everything. So, with comments, it's just 2 dashes, and then you just put what you want. So this run prints no u 10 times, and that it's really useful just to do comments, because even with your handwriting, if your handwriting's bad like me, you sometimes will go back and be like, what did I just take in my notes? I have no idea. This is not useful at all. And if your code's not nice and indented, then it can get confusing real fast. The other thing I would recommend, like I just said, is indenting. So if you have a loop inside a loop, or an if statement inside something, or really anything inside anything else, you're going to want to indent the thing that's inside the outer thing. So you look at this if statement. It's indented fully to the left, and what's inside print okay. It's indented to the right, and the reason I do that, it doesn't affect the code at all. It won't do anything. It won't ruin your code. It won't break it. I just do it for cleanliness. It's easier to look inside this and say, oh, okay, I know what's going on, as opposed to, say, me doing this. Which looks absolutely terrible. Imagine if I was trying to show you guys in a video and you're looking at this like, oh, which in statement goes to which, does this if statement contain everything else? It can get real confusing very fast. So, especially if you're using Team Create, make sure your code's indented and readable so your friends can get work done. I've worked with people who their code was just straight out written like it was hieroglyphics basically, and it took me a long time to interpret it. So yeah, that can get pretty confusing. The other thing I like to do is, now I know it's largely frowned upon to steal free models and stuff like that, if it's considered stealing, but you can do a lot of learning from scripts that are in the toolbox. So if I was to type, let's say I'm going to do, let's say I'm going to pull up a Lava script. You'll get a bunch of scripts, and make sure when you open them that these scripts aren't don't contain viruses or anything, because that's definitely a possibility. And so here, I'm going to open it right now. And so just dissecting the script a little bit, it uses the onTouch function, and it looks like it should work. Local human, part.parent, find first child humanoid, if humanoid equals nil. So this says if the part has a parent that has a humanoid, then, and if the humanoid equals nil, then return in. So it says if it's a normal part, then just ignore it. But if it does have a human or humanoid, then the humanoid.health equals 0, and it kills the humanoid. So your Roblox character walks on this, touches the brick, and dies. So a few things here. So you look at the local variable. Basically what this does is it allows you to access your variables only in these functions. So if you're going to go outside the function and start messing with stuff, and here it's going to work because it thinks it's a different variable, but it allows you to redefine variables in individual functions and if statements and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice if you want to have a variable that you can access across your entire code. You're just going to do like human equals 0. So yeah, I probably botched that explanation a little bit, but it's not a big deal. So anyways, a few like critiques I give to this code is that, as I mentioned earlier, it's not indented too well. So here I'll indent it a little bit, and sometimes I like to have a space between defining variables. That looks a little weird though because we don't have a bunch of them, and this looks like it should work. So what you do is you put this inside of a part, and when a player walks on it, they die. So nothing too complicated, and things can get much more complex, especially when you're defining your own functions and stuff like that, because this is a Roblox defined function. And so yeah, that's about it. I'll be doing more complicated tutorials later on with Lua. I think I've explained just about everything that I deem as basic. You can do a lot more good, honestly, by watching, or not watching, but opening other scripts in the toolbox and editing them a little bit by saying, hey, what happens if I cut out this if statement, which if you're to cut out that if statement, then it's going to touch like whatever brick's on it over and over and over and over. So you could join the server, and if the part that you put the script in is touching the base plate, then it's going to produce like an infinite loop of it touching the base plate and trying to kill the base plate, and it's going to produce an error because obviously the base plate is not a player, so it's just going to spam your output with errors basically. So besides that, I think I'm going to wrap this video up a little bit. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you learned a little bit of something. There's probably a lot more that I could have touched on for the basics, but if you're a new coder and you're looking for, hey, how do I know, where do I get started, this is kind of a good starting point. And it's nice just to have a little bit of advice just as you're going, because I remember back in the day in 2010, which is 10 years ago, it seems crazy, I was trying to code, and there wasn't really any established coding tutorials besides the Roblox wiki, and even that was iffy because it had a lot of depreciated or not depreciated, deprecated, and deprecated content, which means that people don't use it anymore, which means the code is broken, therefore making it not work. So from here, I haven't decided if I'm going to just slowly make the topics more complex, or if I'll just label the tutorials bare minimum, Lua tutorial, complicated Lua tutorial. I may not go kind of like in a chronological order or a order by difficulty. I may just randomly post videos of things I feel like teaching you guys. So again, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you learned something. So have a good day or night, and stay safe.